for Northern Tablelands. I call the member for Maitland.
Thank you, Mr Assistant Speaker. I rise to speak against the retention of this failed payroll tax scheme because it does little or nothing to assist employers who are struggling to pay payroll tax, and it doesn't create enough jobs to deal with the unemployment that is rising. And it's interesting to hear members opposite talking about being number one when it's clear, Mr Assistant Speaker, that they are actually number one in creating unemployment. This is more than double the figure in my region than when this government came to power. The government represents itself as the champions of small business. However, this bill is no help to small businesses. Those on the other side of this House might be ex-bankers, lawyers, multinational corporates, but it appears to me that they have little empathy or experience of small bread and butter businesses. Those who listened to my inaugural speech the other day would know of my 17 years experience growing my small business from a mom and pop shop to a company with 3 distinct small businesses employing over 25 people. I've been an awards-winning business owner. Mr Speaker, could you please stop the interjections? It's just outrageous, really. I'm an undoubted supporter of small business. The problem with payroll tax is it's a tax on jobs, and businesses have to pay it regardless of whether they make a profit or not. The thresholds these days are quite low when you have companies which are essentially, say, 3 distinct businesses like mine was, so they're all grouped together. So when they hit the threshold, or say businesses which might be engaging a number of professional staff, it's quite easy to hit that limit. And small businesses really are hard workers. They're hard-working mums and dads. In fact, during the global financial crisis, I know of many small business owners who reduced their own wages to subsistence levels in order to ensure they were able to keep jobs in their local communities. So they actually deserve a real hand, not this, just pretend thing. The legacy of John Howard's GST is that our state government does not get enough from the federal government. It's no secret that this legacy means that neither the state Liberals or Labor governments are in a position to get rid of the tax, and that hits our small business sector hard. Once you get to that threshold, payroll tax is payable on the whole amount. You probably wouldn't know this because you probably haven't hit it in your business. Or do you have a business? The idea is that you'll only hit it when you employ more people, but it also impacts when employers actually give their employees a raise. And so if you get a $1,000 pay rise across 50 staff, that's a $50,000 increase, which could put you in 1 year above the threshold. And, it's interesting for you guys, there's a tension now because you're actually hearing how the scheme works for people. Once you hit the threshold, you have to pay the tax on the whole payroll. So in 1 year you might be liable for nothing, and the next year you've got to pay payroll tax on your whole payroll. Yet Labor's had a scheme when we were in government, and our scheme helped small businesses with that transition over 5 years, and it was a scheme that was successful. It was a scheme that helped people. I'm saying to you that this scheme doesn't work. It's a failure, and I'm not debating with you, mate. This scheme operated so that they could slowly transition to a full payment, and they could report annually, and they worked with the Department of Trade and Investment rather than being left on their own. This scheme is a ridiculous one. You employ someone into a new position, and then a year later you have to go back and check that your structure is still the same. If you're a growing business, your structure doesn't stay the same for 12 months because you might have put new people on or changed the way that your business works. So there's no incentive to give workers pay rises if employers are on or near the threshold. It's cumbersome to claim. A member of the Maitland business community stood up last week in front of your parliamentary secretary for the Hunter and Central Coast and asked about why they've been audited for 4 months on payroll tax. They asked why the audited accounts from their accountant weren't acceptable, why instead of focusing on their business for 4 months they were held up by the payroll tax people. Where's the benefit to small business in this? It's the dynamic growing businesses change and move with the flow. If we're going to have a scheme, it's got to be something that's workable. Employers who've got very large, very profitable businesses, they've got HR departments, they can process it easily, they keep the volume of numbers that makes it worthwhile. But small businesses, the engine rooms of this economy, are the hardest workers. They're the ones that are being left to be audited for 4 months. They're not actually given any help. If the government's serious in using this mechanism, they should look at innovative schemes which reward businesses for expanding their businesses into regional areas, rather than a blanket scheme which only helps the big operators and it doesn't help small business. And remembering in the Hunter, our unemployment rates are doubling since this government's elected. The previous Labor scheme was abandoned, so this government's not helping employers to create jobs. The government speaks incessantly about the number of jobs they're creating. They talk about being number one, but they're number one in just something, Mr Temporary Speaker. They're just number one in creating unemployment in our regions. It's huff and bluster, and there's no reference value. You can trade 500,000 jobs if you want to create that many jobs, but it means nothing unless you actually quote the unemployment figures. You've got to look at the participation rates. There are people in our communities who are giving up on jobs, who are good workers, because there's no benefits available to them to get back into work, and there's no real incentive for small business to employ them. Just another example of the government failing to honour their promises. I was ejected from the House earlier today, behaving probably a little bit like you guys, for interjections. But because I was injected, Mr Temporary Speaker, because the ministers were gloating about the so-called benefits of their privatisation, continuing to ignore their already broken promises on health and transport structure. And this is all about broken promises. They promised not to truncate the rail line. They promised to build a John Hunter-sized tertiary hospital, retain the existing Maitland Hospital, and all of these promises have been resoundingly broken. And for them to stand up in Parliament making yet more empty promises of jobs that are going to be created that just hurt people who are unemployed, and then talk about mandates is frankly offensive to our community. This government does not understand the word mandate, it doesn't understand the word commitment, and it doesn't understand small business. Labor's commitment to retaining the rail, building the new Maitland Hospital and the Newcastle Convention Centre would have created many, many jobs in our community. Your government sat on its hands with a do-nothing scheme for 4 years, and we've now got double unemployment to show for it. This bill, the government's been telling us how successful it's been, and they should just roll it over. They need to look at the failure of this scheme and the underutilisation of the scheme and see that small businesses have voted with their feet. They've ignored the scheme as useless. They haven't used it to its extent, and the government therefore has none of its mandate to continue it. The Baird government has no commitment to reducing unemployment, particularly in regional and rural Australia. They should try and develop and implement a scheme which actually provides incentives, real incentives to small businesses to create jobs. Instead, their answer to everything is sell the infrastructure, sell off the silver, leave the problem for future generations. And this bill is just another example of this government's lazy approach to stimulating our economy, and it should not be passed.
The question is that the bill be now read a second time. I call the member for Riverstone.